Jax's revenge domain. Why the hell is the CEO's fancy coffee machine making that grinding noise again? I muttered, crawling under the server rack at 6:30 a.m. with a flashlight clenched between my teeth and yesterday's energy bar crumbs in my shirt pocket. That damn espresso contraption was hardwired into the same circuit as our main security panel. Something I discovered the hard way during the great caffeine blackout of 2019 when Oliver Kane's morning latte ritual crashed our entire surveillance system. Nobody documented that little gem. Of course, nobody but me ever documented anything worth knowing around here. But I remembered because that's what I do. I'm Walter Gibson, 49 years old, and I've been keeping this place running for 19 years. Started here in 2005 after 8 years in the Army Signal Corps. Back when this company was 6 people sharing a single T1 line and praying the fax machine wouldn't catch fire. That Tuesday morning started like every other for nearly 2 decades. Me unlocking the office at 6:45 a.m. with the original proximity card they issued me, checking overnight security alerts, and finding whatever mess the night shift left behind. The cleaning crew had unplugged the backup server again to charge their vacuum. Someone from marketing left sushi in the server room mini fridge over the weekend. The whole place reeked like low tide at a fish market. Not technically my job, but guess who ended up scraping seaweed off temperature sensors with a plastic spoon? This guy. Some days I felt like digital duct tape holding everything together while staying invisible until something broke. The CEO still thought I was just the IT guy, even though my badge read IT Security and Facilities Manager, and my inbox had over 2,500 unread emails from people who couldn't figure out why their laptop wouldn't connect to Wi-Fi when they forgot to turn Wi-Fi on. Things got worse when they brought in that new security consultant, Brad Kellerman, fresh out of Stanford with an MBA and a head full of AI buzzwords. Kid once asked me where the server room was. I told him follow the humming sound and the smell of expensive mistakes. Chief, he didn't laugh. Probably because he didn't understand that half our infrastructure was held together by personal relationships I'd built over 19 years. Now, I'm not some social media expert, but apparently 97% of people watching these stories don't subscribe. That's like showing up to a barbecue empty-handed and leaving with a full cooler. So hit that subscribe button, keeps the lights on and the revenge stories flowing. Back to the mess. I didn't go to fancy colleges or wear suits that cost more than my truck payment. But I knew that building's nervous system like my own pulse. Which network switches ran hot in summer, which UPS units started beeping when humidity hit 75%, where the main electrical panel made that clicking sound right before a brownout. I'd kept that company's digital infrastructure breathing through power surges, ransomware attacks, and 3 CEOs worth of terrible technology decisions, and they forgot. No recognition, no bonuses, no handwritten notes from the board. Just that one time when I stayed until midnight to restore our backup systems after a crypto locker hit, and the old CFO gave me a gift card to Subway and said, "You're a lifesaver, Willie." My name is Walter, after 15 years of working together. At some point, I stopped correcting them. I wasn't trying to be the hero. I just believed in doing things right. That lease agreement, the one that let us squat in prime downtown real estate for $4,100 a month when comparable space was going for $12,000. I co-signed that back in 2005 when we couldn't get a landlord to return our calls. The company had 12 employees and a network held together with prayer and Ethernet cable. The founder, Colton Reed, asked if I'd help with the paperwork since I had decent credit from my military days. Hell, I didn't just co-sign. I put the whole lease under my name. Nobody else qualified back then. Didn't mind helping out. They felt like family. Like most families, they eventually took the foundation for granted and forgot who built it. You ever walk into a room you've secured and maintained for decades, and suddenly realize nobody sees you unless the internet goes down or there's a data breach? That was me, invisible until the fan got hit. Then suddenly I was everyone's digital superhero and janitor rolled into one. God forbid the email server hiccuped. Then I was Saint Walter, savior of productivity. But here's what they never understood. Those vendor relationships that kept everything running, those were personal. Tony from the electrical company who answered my calls at midnight because I'd helped his kid with college applications. Maria from building security who fast-tracked our permits because I remembered her birthday every year. The insurance agent who gave us premium rates because I'd served with his brother in Iraq. None of that was transferable to some AI algorithm or Stanford MBA. You can't automate trust, can't digitize 19 years of handshake deals and after-hours favors. but they were about to learn that lesson the expensive way. So yeah, I kept showing up, quiet, competent, reliable as a hammer. Then came that Thursday in early October. HR sent an all-staff email about strategic workforce optimization initiatives in corporate speak. That's like a doctor saying, "We need to discuss your test results." My gut went cold. I'd seen enough executives sweat through layoff meetings to know what was coming. I was next, and I wasn't going to make it easy. The meeting invite arrived at 4:58 p.m. Subject line: Quick sync, HR. No context, no warning, just a calendar bomb dropped on my day like a turd in a swimming pool. I walked in the next morning wearing my lucky polo shirt, the navy one with the small coffee stain that looked like Texas. That shirt had survived 2 office relocations, 1 server room flood, and a surprise office party that ended with someone from sales crying in the supply closet. Nicole Carter from HR was already seated in conference room B, smiling like a real estate agent at a foreclosure. Next to her sat some guy from legal I'd never met. Slick hair, expensive shoes, and a manila folder he kept stroking like it contained nuclear launch codes. "Walter, thanks for coming in," Nicole chirped. We wanted to have a strategic restructuring conversation. That word restructuring hit like a brick to the solar plexus. I'd heard it translated for others. Covered shifts for victims. I knew the script by heart, first the smile, then the folder, then the apology that wasn't really an apology. "We're pivoting to AI-enhanced security solutions," she continued, moving in a more automated direction. I stared at her. That direction wouldn't happen to include me, would it? Silence, then a gentle slide of the folder across the table. Inside, a generic severance package with more fine print than a pharmaceutical commercial. 4 months' pay. NDA clause, health insurance through month end. How generous. The letter didn't even get my title right. Called me Walter J. Gibson, IT support specialist. 19 years, and they couldn't remember what I actually did. "We're asking for your badge and access cards today," the lawyer added. "Also any company property in your possession." I took a breath that could have inflated a tire. Reached into my wallet and set my badge on the table like a poker chip. Then the building access card. The server room key, all carefully labeled in my handwriting from 2005. "You sure about this?" I asked. Eyes locked on Nicole. She gave me that HR face. Sympathetic, professional, fake as margarine. "It's not personal, Walter." "Sure it isn't," I muttered, standing up. "Just remember, you can't automate what you never understood." I walked out before I could say something that would void my severance. The afternoon sun felt sharp on my skin. Traffic buzzed past, but everything seemed muffled. I didn't cry, not in front of them. Not after 19 years of keeping their systems secure, their data protected, their digital lives functioning. They wanted to replace me with algorithms, fine. But they forgot one crucial detail. I didn't drive straight home, pulled into a McDonald's parking lot, sat in my truck with the engine off, and called Mason Wells. Mason was an old Army buddy who'd gone to law school on the GI Bill. Now he specialized in employment law and had a particular hatred for corporate America's treatment of veterans. He picked up on the second ring. "Walt, what's up?" "Nothing good," I said, "but it's about to get interesting. You remember that lease I signed back in 2005? A pause. Then a low whistle. "Oh man, that lease. Yep. Think it's time I read the fine print again." My apartment smelled like leftover pizza and old war movies. I kicked off my boots, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and walked straight to the file cabinet where I kept my insurance policy folder. Black label, filed under building legal docs. Never thought I'd actually need it. Inside, the original lease agreement, 4 amendments, a receipt for the security system upgrade I'd personally funded in 2008, and 3 business cards from vendors who only dealt with me directly. 19 years ago, they couldn't get approved for a cell phone plan, let alone commercial real estate. No credit history, no revenue. Just big dreams and a business plan written on napkins. Colton Reed had sat across from me at Denny's and said, "Walt, if you don't help us with this lease, we'll be working out of my garage indefinitely." So I signed. Not co-signed, signed the whole thing myself just until they got established. We never had that conversation again. After that, it was always me who handled lease renewals, building maintenance, vendor relationships. They never asked to take my name off, never even thought about it. I was the invisible foundation that everything else was built on. I sat at my kitchen table, cracked open another beer, and started reading like my future depended on it. Page 8, Section 12C. Renewal of lease term requires written notice from lessee no later than 60 days prior to expiration date. I blinked. Read it again, then check the expiration date. September 30th. Today was October 5th. 5 days too late. They hadn't renewed. Hadn't even attempted to. Not an email, not a phone call, not a sticky note. The legal department was too busy playing with AI contracts to remember basic real estate law. They were so focused on disrupting everything that they missed the most fundamental deadline in the company's existence. I leaned back in my chair. A slow grin spread across my face, the kind you get when you realize the universe just handed you the keys to the kingdom. It wasn't just that they fired me. It was how they fired me. Like some obsolete piece of equipment, like 19 years of expertise meant nothing compared to some Stanford kid's PowerPoint presentation. But see, my expertise ran deeper than their algorithms could calculate. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through contacts. Insurance policy still listed me as primary contact. Security vendor contracts renewed annually under my direct authorization. Building maintenance agreements that only worked because I had personal relationships with every technician. Backup power systems that I'd installed and maintained personally. Everything that actually mattered still ran through me. The building's entire infrastructure was a house of cards, and I was the table holding it up. I could warn them, send an email with subject line urgent, legal issue, forward the lease documents with a helpful reminder, but that's not what they'd do if roles were reversed. If I were them, I'd already be training my replacement and wiping my access logs. So I closed the lease folder, finished my beer, and decided to let them discover the consequences of automating human relationships. The silence would teach them what 19 years of institutional knowledge was actually worth. I called Mason again the next morning. How fast can you file a lease termination notice for a missed renewal? 24 hours if you pay for expedited processing. Do it. And Mason, make sure this thing is bulletproof. I want every I dotted and T crossed. Copy that. Sending you the paperwork now. I printed the forms, signed where indicated, and drove to the courthouse. Paid the extra $200 for same-day processing. The clerk stamped everything with a satisfying thunk that echoed through the marble hallway like a judge's gavel. Back home, I opened my laptop and drafted the first of several emails that would change everything. Subject: building security, immediate action required. Effective immediately. I'm terminating all security vendor relationships, insurance policies, and building maintenance contracts under my personal authorization. As these agreements were personal guarantees tied to my employment, they expire with my departure. New arrangements will need to be established with replacement vendors. Documentation attached. Walter Gibson. I hit send and leaned back. The building that had been my second home for 19 years was about to become their worst nightmare. They wanted AI solutions. Let's see an algorithm negotiate with the fire marshal when the sprinkler system fails inspection. But I wasn't done. I had one more card to play, and this one would hurt. See, back in 2010, we'd had a major break-in attempt. Some kids tried to get into the server room to steal equipment. I'd upgraded our entire surveillance system on my own dime because the company was too cheap to pay for proper security. Those cameras had been recording everything for 14 years. Every executive meeting in the glass conference rooms, every after-hours performance review session. Every time someone brought their spouse to the office for activities that weren't exactly work-related. I'd never looked at the footage unless there was a security incident. Hadn't even thought about it until yesterday. But now, sitting in my kitchen with a fresh cup of coffee and a growing sense of justice, I remembered what those cameras might have captured. I remote accessed the security server. My login still worked. Of course it did. Brad Kellerman probably didn't even know the surveillance system existed, let alone how to manage access controls. What I found made my coffee taste sweeter. Oliver Kane, our fearless CEO, had been using the executive conference room for some very creative accounting sessions with our biggest client. The kind where contract amendments got signed without board approval. The kind where kickbacks changed hands in plain sight of a camera that recorded everything in crystal clear 4K. There was Nicole Carter from HR discussing how to age out expensive senior employees during what she thought was a private conversation with the legal team. Turns out they'd been planning to fire me and 3 other veterans for months, regardless of performance. And my personal favorite, Brad Kellerman, the AI security expert, admitting to another consultant that he had no idea how our actual systems worked and was basically selling them expensive software they didn't need. I downloaded everything to an encrypted drive. Then I called my old Army buddy Brady Maxwell, who still worked in the IT department. Brady, it's Walt. You might want to back up your personal files today. Why? What's going on? Let's just say the company's about to experience some technical difficulties. Walt, what did you do? Nothing yet. But remember that conversation we had about how the building's infrastructure was held together by personal relationships? Oh man. You're not going to. I already did. Fair warning, buddy. Update your resume. Brady was a good guy. Served 2 tours in Afghanistan before joining the company. He deserved a heads up. The rest of them could figure it out on their own. 2 days later, I sat on my couch drinking coffee and watching the local news. The lead story made me smile wider than I had in months. Downtown tech company faces emergency eviction. The reporter stood outside our building while executives loaded computers into rental trucks. Oliver Kane looked like he'd aged 5 years in 48 hours. Nicole Carter was nowhere to be seen, probably updating her LinkedIn profile. The company failed to renew their lease agreement, the reporter explained, and multiple building systems have experienced failures following the departure of their longtime facilities manager. My phone buzzed with a text from Brady. Dude, they're freaking out. Sprinkler system failed inspection this morning. Insurance company dropped them yesterday. Building manager is demanding immediate evacuation. CEO's having a complete meltdown. What did you do? I typed back, nothing. Just stopped doing everything. The best part was watching them scramble to find replacement vendors. Turned out those personal relationships I'd built over 19 years weren't so easy to replicate. Tony from the electrical company wouldn't even return their calls. Maria from building security told them she was fully booked for the next 6 months. The insurance agent who'd given us premium rates for years suddenly couldn't offer coverage at any price. It's amazing how quickly corporate loyalty evaporates when there's no personal foundation underneath it. By afternoon, I'd already lined up the replacement tenant, a small manufacturing firm run by fellow veterans who understood the value of experience over algorithms. They offered $8,440 per month for a 5-year lease. More than double what the tech company had been paying. That evening, my phone rang. Oliver Kane. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Walter, we need to talk. This eviction thing, there has to be some mistake. No mistake, I said. Calm as still water. You terminated the person who held all the vendor relationships. Turns out those relationships were personal guarantees tied to my employment status, but the lease reads Section 12C. You missed the renewal deadline by 5 days. I tried to make it work for 19 years, Oliver. Took care of every detail so you didn't have to think about them. Now you get to think about all of them at once. Silence. Heavy breathing. We can fix this. Come back as a consultant. Name your price. I looked around my living room, at my bookshelf full of technical manuals, at the framed photo of my old Army unit, at the certificate from the company's 10-year anniversary dinner where they misspelled my name. Oliver, for 19 years, I was your digital janitor. Invisible until something broke. You replaced me with an algorithm. Now you can debug your problems the same way. I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside, construction crews were already moving equipment into the building for the new tenants. Inside my apartment, everything was quiet and calm for the first time in years. They wanted to optimize me out of existence. Instead, they optimized themselves right out of business. Sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones. Sometimes experience beats innovation. And sometimes the quiet guy in the corner knows more than anyone realizes. But this story doesn't end with a simple phone call and a satisfied smile. Real life has consequences that ripple out for months, sometimes years. The tech company's meltdown became a case study in what happens when you mistake institutional knowledge for disposable overhead. Within a week, local business journals picked up the story. Downtown firm's eviction highlights infrastructure risks ran in 3 different publications. The article didn't name me directly, but anyone in the industry could read between the lines. Comment sections filled with similar stories from other displaced IT veterans who'd been pushed aside for younger, cheaper, supposedly smarter alternatives. 2 months later, I got a call from a reporter doing a feature on age discrimination in tech. Sarah Martinez from the Business Weekly wanted to interview the mystery facilities manager whose departure had triggered such a spectacular corporate collapse. I agreed, but only if she focused on the broader issue rather than personal revenge. Companies treat institutional knowledge like it's replaceable, I told her. They think everything can be documented in a manual or automated with software, but relationships aren't transferable. Trust isn't downloadable. Experience isn't something you can buy on a subscription plan. The article came out 3 weeks later with the headline, "The Hidden Cost of Corporate Memory Loss." It featured interviews with a dozen other veterans who'd been pushed out of companies they'd helped build. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone started ringing with job offers. Not just any offers, but consulting gigs from companies who'd finally realized what they'd lost when they eliminated their expensive senior staff. Insurance firms wanting someone who understood legacy systems. Manufacturing companies looking for someone who could bridge the gap between old-school reliability and new tech efficiency. But the call that mattered most came from Jake Rodriguez, a former Marine who'd started his own cybersecurity firm after getting laid off from a Fortune 500 company. "Walt, I've been following your story. We're growing fast and need someone with your background to head up our government contracts division. These companies are finally learning that security clearances and real-world experience can't be replaced by algorithms." I visited his office the following week. Clean, professional, but with an American flag in the lobby and photos of the team's military service on the walls. These weren't kids playing with venture capital money. They were grown men and women who understood that some things can't be disrupted, only improved through experience and dedication. "We're not trying to revolutionize everything," Jake explained. "We're trying to make things work better. Our clients are tired of paying for solutions that create more problems than they solve." I signed on as senior partner for infrastructure security, not as an employee but as an owner. For the first time in 19 years, my expertise was valued as an asset rather than a cost center. 6 months after the eviction, I drove past my old building during lunch. The veteran-owned manufacturing firm had installed a new sign, "Precision Components, veteran-owned and operated." Through the windows, I could see the same conference rooms where I'd been fired, now filled with people building actual products instead of disrupting imaginary markets. The tech company had eventually found space in a strip mall 20 miles outside downtown. According to Brady, who'd landed on his feet at a defense contractor, they'd lost 2 major clients and half their staff. Oliver Kane had been quietly pushed out by the board and replaced with someone who understood that some problems require human solutions. Nicole Carter had moved to a startup that folded within 6 months. Brad Kellerman was selling insurance in Phoenix. The legal team had been dissolved entirely. But here's the thing about real revenge. It's not just about watching your enemies fail. It's about building something better from the ashes of their mistakes. By year's end, our veteran-owned security firm had landed 3 major government contracts worth $2.3 million annually. We'd hired 8 other displaced IT veterans, all over 45, all with decades of experience that companies had thrown away in favor of cheaper alternatives. We started a mentorship program pairing experienced tech workers with younger veterans transitioning to civilian careers. Not to replace the old with the new, but to transfer knowledge before it walked out the door in a cardboard box. The lease on my old building came up for renewal again this year. The manufacturing company exercised their option to buy the property outright. They asked me to consult on their expansion plans. Turns out, when you treat people with respect and value their experience, they remember, and they call you when they need someone who actually knows how things work. I raised my coffee mug to the empty kitchen table where this whole story began, to endings that become beginnings, to institutions that value people over algorithms, to the understanding that some things get better with age, including the people who know how to fix them. They fired me because they thought my experience was obsolete. They were wrong. Experience isn't obsolete. It's just undervalued until you need it. And when you finally realize what you've lost, it's usually too late to get it back. But sometimes, if you're very lucky and very careful, you get the chance to build something better than what you lost. Something that values the quiet professionals who keep the lights on, while everyone else is chasing the next big disruption. That's worth more than revenge. That's worth building a legacy on. Subscribe for more stories about the people who actually know how things work. And remember, respect your elders. We've been debugging problems since before debugging had a name. Corporate America loves to talk about human capital, but they keep forgetting that some assets appreciate with age, especially the ones that hold everything else together. You can automate processes, but you can't automate the relationships that make those processes work when everything goes wrong.